Wow.
So cool.
So let's say we have a function called multiply without L. So it does nothing, but it will just return. And then if you call this function using numbers, then you are passing the value. But if you have a function where it's like set name and then person and name, and you say, so here I am going to add something to this object. So if I change something here, it will change the original object as well. So set name, like it can be, I already have an object which has age, and then you want to add name to it. So let's say we have a object called person1, which is this, and then you want to add name to this person. So you say set name to this person, and then like so. And if I do console log, you will see that this person1 object, like if I log it before the function call and log it afterwards, this object will change. But if you have const a equals 5 and const b equals 10, and you do and let us say I was changing it to something else, like if you do something with this variable inside this function, it will not affect outside. But if I use an object, by default object is passed by using the reference. So if I make any change to this object, it will reflect, it will go to that memory, it will go and add this property to this object. But some data types like number, string and other things, they are more primitive. So primitive data types in JavaScript, you always call the function by value and not reference.
Like, what is the use of this? Like, it is just a like property, like object is passed by reference and the primitive is like passed by values. It's just property, or we have.
So this is how the language behaves, and using this, by knowing this, you can write code where you will not make mistakes, and you can take advantage of this, that you know that if I pass this object to this function will do something to this object. So whenever you want to pass an object around, like give it to this function, then give it to this other function, and that's how you are going to implement your application. Then because JavaScript has this feature, you can use it. So at the same time, if you know that if you pass an object and if you change the object without making a copy of it, it will affect the original object as well. So if you know that, then you will not introduce bugs. So it's more that JavaScript behaves like that, like this. For primitive data types, it will be passed by value, and for objects, it will be passed by reference. So array and objects and other things. Yes. You are asking? No.
I actually found an exercise in CodeWords that you had to make a new array based on an original array, make some changes to this new array, and then, just like console log the value, but you were not allowed to modify the original array.
Yes, so in that case, you make a copy of the array and then you do something to that array.
No, the thing is that since arrays are objects, basically in JavaScript,
yeah,
and we're passing the value by how it's called, we're passing not by reference,
passing by reference,
by value. If I just made a copy and I modify this new copy, it was always also modifying.
You can use splice for copying.
Actually, you can make the what's called the spread operator.
Yes, so there are many ways to copy the array. So the idea is that you copy the array and then you do something. So there are multiple ways to do it. You can use splice, you can use spread, you can create an array object like array.from and then pass the original array object and it will return you a new one. So there are many ways to do it. So I was going to talk about call stack and scopes. So do you know what is call stack in JavaScript? No? So if I have a function like multiply given two numbers, it's going to multiply two of them together and return that value. So using this function I am going to write another one like calculate square. So if you give it a number x, it will multiply x by x. Then it will return the result, and then you have a main function where you have a variable called and then you calculate its square. I don't know what variable name to use. Okay, square me, and then you log in the console. Something like this, and then you make this function call. So what will happen when you call this function at line number 21? Like first, when the JavaScript compiler looks at this code, it will look from top to bottom, and then it will know that I have a function called multiply, and then another function called square me, then another called main, and then it's supposed to call main function. So when it starts executing the code, first it will make the function call here, and then it will go and make a function call here, and then from here it will go here. So
Callback.
it's not callback, it's call stack. So if I ask you to do something, if I give you a task, and then to get that task done, you have to ask someone else. Like you ask your friend, like if I ask you to make tea and you don't have sugar or you don't have tea bags, you ask your friend to go to market and buy tea bag. So you can't continue unless he or she brings tea bag, and then you can do rest of it like boil water and then put the tea bag and then you prepare tea. So at any given point of time, JavaScript can do one thing and not more than one thing. It's single threaded. It means that it can like execute just one line of code or do one thing. It can't do more than one thing. So when you make this function call main, then it goes here and it sees that it has to call this function. So when it's calling this function, it's waiting. It's not going to this next line. It will not continue to line number 17 unless line number 15 has finished. Similarly, here it can't go to line number 8 unless line number 7 is done. So if this function takes a lot of time, like if it takes 15 seconds, let us say, then this whole thing will take 15 seconds. So when you make this function call, first this one is called, then this is not finished, but square me gets called, square me is not finished, then multiply gets called, then multiply call has finished, then square me call will get finished because it has a value and it will return, and then rest of code will run, like it will call console log, so console log will happen, and then console log is done, then main is done. So it's
last in, first out.
so Yeah, last in, first out. So it's called, the data structure is called stack, and if you have to visualize it, you can use this tool.
That's a tool. So nice.
So
Share that on Slack. That's awesome.
it is there.
Is it?
Good. So something happened. So if I have to rerun it, so I call main function here. Can you see? So main is called, and then like let's rerun it. So main, and then it goes to this line, and suddenly it goes to this other line, and then
And you have the callback queue.
so it calls square me, and then it calls multiply. So you see how everything is getting stacked on top of each other, and then it does this m into n, and then multiply has not finished it. This computation has done. So it went to CPU and said that I have these two numbers, you know how to compute, please compute the value and give it to me. Oh, I did something wrong. So, but you get the point, right? How it's working. So this code, this whole thing is synchronous. It means that unless this function call is done, you can't go to this line. And unless this is done, you can't go to this line. And this is how in most of the programming languages, this is how it works. So if you call a function and it calls another function and it calls another function, then it will be done using call stack. So if I had to do something very stupid, and then if I wanted to, every time you call multiply, I again call multiply. So it goes in a loop. So if I run this code, you see it will keep adding to this stack, and then the stack is never going to get cleared. So it will go beyond the pace. Then after some point, like in Chrome, there is a limit that you cannot have more than 16,000 items or something like that. It's in thousands.
That's why it's called
So
stack build.
yeah, so it says that call stack limit exceeded.
And the name of the page called Stack Overflow is coming from there, I guess.
Yes, Stack Overflow. Very good.
By the way, so like when you write code like this, is that called stack code?
That's another thing. You guys know a lot of keywords.
Yeah, we just share, random thing.
We are internet people.
So if I had to run this code in like Chrome, so let's see if it throws an error, because I'm just going in a loop. Like there is no ending here. It's not like if m is 1 then do this, if n is something else then do this. I'm just saying, okay, if you call me, I will call myself till infinity. So it's never going to finish, and if you keep doing it, and if Chrome does not put a limit, eventually the whole memory will be filled. So these browsers have something called a maximum limit of call stack. How many things can you stack in call stack? And there is a limit, and it will throw you some error. So let's look at the error which you will get. Open source. So here it says maximum call limit exceeded, right? And it also tells you that on which line the error occurred. So it's line number 2, like it went to line number 2 and then again it was going in a loop. So like if you see this error in your code, you can be sure that you are doing something which you should not do, like maybe going into recursion and not ending that loop. So, and if I throw an error here, like Like this function does not know how to do this, whatever you are asking it to do. So it will throw an error. Then what happens? Then it tells that uncaught error, and then error message. Then it tells that error occurred at this line, like in this file at line number 2, and this function was called by this other function square me at line number 8, and this other function at line number 16, and then this main was called at line number 22. So this is how you read the error message. Okay. So this is how call stack works, and if something goes wrong during the call and there is a stack, the debugger or JavaScript console will give you the stack as well as the details and line numbers, and in Chrome if you click here it will take you to this line where the error occurred.
Off-topic question, there are other programming languages that are not single-threaded, in Ruby or something?
Most of the programming languages are by default single-threaded, most of them.
Yeah.
And if you want to run your code on 2 CPUs or like do something in parallel, then it will take some effort. Some languages are designed so that you can write parallel code very easily, and in some languages it's very difficult.
Cool.
So this is call stack, and so you understand this code now, right? And if I have to do it in asynchronous manner, do you know this function called set interval, set timeout? So this function will say hello to some person, and it will do it after a given time. So do you know arrow functions by now? No? Good. So So if I call this function, let's put some boring names. I have made a mistake. Did you notice?
It's in the time.
Yeah. So let's say I want to say hello to person 1 after 1000 milliseconds. 1000 millisecond would be 1 second, and then 500.
Oh man, you're a pro. You're
What's that?
doing
What
things
is
that.
that extension you're using?
What?
No.
It's a feature in VS Code and
Yeah,
Sublime
what's
Text.
it? It's not extension?
So if you just select a pattern like this, like single quote and comma, and you press Ctrl D or Command D, it will find the next pattern matching.
Ah.
And then I use the cursor like right arrow, then I go to the right arrow, then I can type.
That's fantastic. Anyway, so good that you're.
So what happens when I call this function? What do you think will happen when I run this code?
Hello. Hello.
So
Hello.
What? No.
So in the previous code, when I made this function call, like if I had to do it 2 times or 3 times, like the line number 22 will run, then will it run immediately or will it wait for it to finish? How will it go? But it will not happen in parallel, right? But in this case, because I am saying that, so what happens that when I call this function, it will go here, it will create a set timeout. So set timeout is very quick. It just says that you have to do something in future. So it will just schedule a task, and then it will say, okay, your scheduling is done, now go back. So similarly, all of these set timeouts will be set really fast. But when will this hello person 1, hello person 2 will appear will
First
depend on the time.
First person 2 will appear. Then first person.
You are jumping now. So let's run this code. Let's see how the call stack looks when we do it.
It's like the timeout is way bigger.
Something is wrong here. Hmm.
The timeout is like function is given way bigger.
No, this is not running my code. It's running its own code.
You need to maybe letter function.
Maybe try it in a different browser.
Actually, I tried this on Google Chrome on console and increased the time. So you can see.
I think there is some error. So let's run this in the browser and let us see if it works, if it's correct code or not. Hmm? HTML. Yeah, it was picking Django syntax. So okay, it works. So if this code is correct, then maybe this environment does not understand arrow functions. So I will need to fix my code.
I want to just like set timeout is like function is not given by JavaScript or this given by web APIs. So it's like so it's
You're-
sent to the web APIs.
You're way ahead of everyone else. So yes, so that's what I was going to show you, that it will go to, yeah. So I will just increase this timeout to insane amount. Like,
Insane.
Wow.
10 seconds.
1700 is minimum. We'll say.
okay, so let's look at this code now. So if I run this code, like we have a function and this function is getting called multiple times. How many times? 3, 7 times. So when you run this code, it's going to the call stack. Like you call say hello person 2 and then it calls set timeout, and then from this it's going to web API. So on web API, so if I resume, like there's another timer and then there's another timer,
This is fantastic.
and this timer gets finished, then it goes to callback queue, and then anonymous, this will go to call stack again once everything from call stack is done. So the way it works is that you have some function calls here. So JavaScript knows that when it has to run this code, it has to run all of it, and then once it has run all of it, like when the call stack is empty, then it will look at callback queue. Like if there is something pending to be done, then it will pick the first item from the queue and then process it. So it's like, so like you see like it will come here and it will go there. So when you do something async, JavaScript as a language does not know how to handle that. So it has to take help from the browser. These browsers implement web API, like set timeout is one API, making Ajax call is another API, which is provided by the browser. It's not part of the language. So set interval, set timeout, any of it is not part of the language. Even when you click on a button and then you say that when this button is clicked, I want to do something, that's also part of the web API. So JavaScript language has very minimal features. It takes help from the web API to do things which are asynchronous. Like when you say set timeout, then it will call the set timeout function. The set timeout is part of web API, so it will go and make that web API call. Then once this thing says that okay, I am done, I want to send it to callback queue, it will go to callback queue and wait for the call stack to be empty, and once the call stack is empty, then it will pick this thing from the callback. So there can be a situation that you have few things happening on the call stack and they are pushing things to web API, and web API will in the end put some things in the queue, and the queue will get cleared when the call stack is empty. So if there is an application which is very slow, it may be that whatever you are waiting for is in the queue and call stack is busy. But this is how it works. So it will go, the call stack is like layer after layer. I make this function call and then it goes to this function, and then I make another call to set timeout. Then set timeout is web API, so it will run a timer, and after that given time it will call another function, console log. So this function is the function which will be called back. This is the callback function, and this callback function is going to call console log again. So if I had to just reduce this timer to do it like this, so see this is done, and then here it says it will wait for everything to finish and then only callback queue will be processed. So this anonymous function makes a console log and then it prints hello and name of the person, and then that's how it works. So this is how callbacks work. So a callback, the name callback, it means that call me back whenever something is done. So a callback will be, the callback will not happen immediately. So if I put 0 seconds here, what do you expect? Will it go to web API? Will it go to callback queue? Or just because it's 0, it will say that okay, you are not.
It will go to the API.
You see, it's going to the queue, and the timer is finishing immediately as soon as it reaches there. So this is how it works. Questions?
Why are anonymous in the callback?
Because I have not given any name to this function. If I had to give
Where
it very name, like yeah, if you call it my function or something like that, then it will be. Then it's called my function. Okay. So I don't know what exercise we can give. So I will go ahead with implementing the search using Ajax, unless you have any question here. And then once we finish the search, I would like to talk about scopes, because like, do you use const and let, or are you still using var?
Now we have started using that const.
Okay, did you watch, all of you watch that video, let versus const versus var? Do you know the difference?
Yes.
Okay, good. So I will try to give it some time, maybe last 45 minutes, but we should do some, I will start with some code and then you have to finish it.